So the last few days have been quite a bit of work. I started out trying to install Kubernetes the hard way and ended up not necessarily giving up, but finding out I just didn't have enough hardware here in South Carolina with me to continue with that project. I've moved on to K3s, and K3s requires a lot less hardware. So this tutorial is going to show you how to use K3s. Now K3s really isn't a fork of Kubernetes, it's more of like a distribution. So what Rancher has done is they've packaged everything together and they've provided their own package managers and everything and made it fairly simple to install. I also feel that by covering K3s, it's going to make it a lot easier for the home lab people that I have in the audience that I'm targeting to get to know Kubernetes. I feel like if I don't have the hardware here, most of you won't either. So I have a fairly good R710 server, and I say good. It has enough cores and everything at home back at the Freedom House to do that. But here, I don't. I have a laptop, an old Dell laptop, and a couple of Raspberry Pis with me. So it's going to make it very difficult to have enough hardware here to set up what I need. With only 4 CPU cores on a laptop and a couple of Raspberry Pis, and I don't even have a Raspberry Pi 4 here, there are 2 3s. I'm just really wondering if I'll have enough equipment to make pure Kubernetes work. Now, I definitely want to come back to Kubernetes, but for today, let's start learning about Kubernetes in a simple, clean way that seems to have a little bit more documentation and is generally a little bit easier to get running. So this video is going to be about installing K3s. Alrighty, so the first thing that we're going to need to do to start installing K3s is have a VM set up. Now, as far as I've read, it seems like you possibly could run K3s inside of a container, but I've made a few attempts at doing it, and I can't seem to get it to install correctly. So without spending a much more time than I probably need to for learning, and in order to keep my video schedule or keep some amount of videos coming regularly, which YouTube likes to see and it helps keep our numbers up, I wanted to bring you this video out, and without having to spend all that time to do it, which I've literally been working on this since Thursday night. Well, I went to bed pretty quickly after we got home from the conference Thursday night, but Friday, I spent all day Friday, Saturday, and Sunday working on this, and we're here on Monday filming it. I'm going to do this in a VM, and although you probably are asking why I'm not doing this on bare metal, in the start of the video we kind of covered that. I got a couple of Raspberry Pis down here and my Proxmox server, so I figured I'd set some VMs up here on Proxmox and do it here just for ease of demonstration. I don't really want to tear down my server or anything like that. So with that, let's go ahead and create a VM. Now, the way I have my Windows set up here on my screen recorder, it makes it so it's difficult or impossible to see my mouse. And if any of you guys know how to solve that with the Streamlabs or OBS, go ahead and let me know. It would be kind of nice. But up here in the upper right hand corner, you can see 2 blue buttons. One of the blue buttons is called Create CT, and the other one is called Create VM. We're going to create the VM by clicking Create VM. Now, if you're into Kubernetes or even probably at this point and you are trying to follow along, you may want to go ahead and skip ahead. But I've made numerous videos in the past, and I've been accused of not providing this information for people following along. And our channel is primarily about Proxmox and even more geared somewhat towards people learning Proxmox. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to walk you through even creating the VM. Now we'll probably go ahead and fast forward quite quickly through the content where we actually do the Ubuntu install, because I'm just going to basically click through it and use a default style install there, and there's other videos if you need help there. I really want to teach you that, but if you're struggling installing Ubuntu, you probably want to do that background research and knowledge before you go ahead ahead and try K3s. But anyways, back to the install here. We've created a new virtual machine by hitting that create VM button, and now we need to fill out that information for that virtual machine so the system can build it and we can install Ubuntu on it. Now, I probably could have done this with like a cloud init image, but for a beginner, I feel that without getting into a command line and command line tools, this is best. And that's some of the feedback I've gotten. I really like doing cloud init images, and I probably would prefer to do this for myself if I was doing it that way and not building this tutorial for you. But with building this tutorial for you, it's easier if we stay inside a graphical user interface for a larger majority of our viewers. So with that, we're going to go ahead and give this a name, and I'm just going to call it K3s, and then I probably want this. You will probably, if you're playing with K3s, want this to start on boot. That means if your system shuts down or you reboots for service or something, that it's going to start up automatically. I'm going to select my image, and I am going to use Ubuntu live server here myself. And in the system, we're going to leave all of these as defaults. We can go ahead and put this QEMU guest agent. I'll go ahead and install this after we get everything up and running, and I'll show you kind of some of the information it provides. But it helps provide more accurate CPU and RAM utilization information back to the Proxmox server, and it also provides some other information like your IP address and stuff. It can just make overall working with VMs a lot better of an experience inside of Proxmox. So we'll leave this SCSI, and on our local LVM and 32 gigs, this is an SSD, so we want to go ahead and click the discard button, and then we're going to hit next again. So if I understood some of the reading right, we're going to need at least 2 CPU cores and 2 gigs of RAM, which it has by default. That's not going to leave a lot of overhead for our containers, but we're really doing this here today to just learn and start experiencing with Kubernetes. Like I said, I was at Open Source 101 last Thursday, and if you saw that video, I was blown away by how much discussion we had about Kubernetes, and I'm actually fairly excited to get back to the Freedom House and have like my R710 with a couple of other laptops and a bunch of hardware. I'm actually considering converting one of my 3rd gen Ryzen systems that I have up there that I haven't used. I didn't even bring it with me. It was supposed to be a gaming computer, but it's aging pretty well, and I've stopped gaming a lot, into a server just so I can actually play with this. And we'll probably build a Proxmox cluster again. I lost my cluster towards the end of the year last year due to some failures. But anyways, regardless, I'm kind of looking forward to some of that. I don't know where we're going to go, but we definitely have some plans there. I really want to learn more about this. Probably starting off with K3s, getting familiar with Kubernetes concepts, what I can and can't do. And then I want to run pure Kubernetes. I want to know how to do it. And I want to have tutorials for all of my viewers here to know how to do it, because if that's what the industry's requiring, it's good for us to know how to do it. Even as hobbyists, if we're trying to strive for that industry point, it's good to know how to do it. So here we go. I'm going to change my bridge here. If your server's not set up that way, you don't need to change your bridge. But the way my network's set up, I have a separate VLAN, which is tied to that bridge that all of my containers and VM traffic go through. And that keeps us somewhat separated and isolated from the rest of my house network for things like ARP packets and other things that just go through on the network. It helps speed up and secure the network. It makes it so some of my containers that might be exposed to the internet and stuff aren't exposed to my computers or my IoT devices in the house that are Wi-Fi based or network based, aren't necessarily able to see computers or storage drives or whatnot. And it's a layer of security. It's definitely not an end-all be-all, but it's definitely just another layer in the onion, as so to say. So anyways, we have our VLAN here, and we're going to go through and we're going to hit finish here at this point. And now we have a VM, and the system's just building it out here. Now, kind of to talk about here, if we go back up to our server, and of course I'm at my update screen because that's where we normally are, but we go to networks here, you can see that I have a VLAN 60 here, and then my VMBR1 is actually connected to VLAN 60 here. If I highlight it, it's connected to VLAN 60. So where that bridge is, even though it's using the same ENO1 Ethernet port, and this computer only has one Ethernet port here as the VMBR0, we're pushing that over to a VLAN that's tied to ENO0, and then we're communicating out on VMBR1 over VLAN 60, and then my router handles all the separation of that traffic and the routing rules, and there's firewall rules based in there too for traffic shaping and other things, and so that's kind of how that works. But now our K3s VM has been built, it's ready to go in our server, and we really don't have to do anything else here in Proxmox. So we can go ahead and we can start that up, and we can then open up the console window and start the install here. Now, with the way my windows are set, I'm going to have to change something for you to see that window, but that's inside my screen recorder. If you would hit console. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and mute this, and you guys at this point are probably only going to watch a fast forward if I include any of this, but we're going to install Ubuntu here, and then we'll come back for the rest of the tutorial. All right, so now that we have Ubuntu server installed, we're here at the login screen. And we're going to go ahead and log in. Now that we're logged in, there's a few things that we want to do to necessarily start this process, but they're kind of just initial VM housekeeping things and housekeeping things in general that we just do on every VM. And so the first one we're going to do is we're going to run sudo. So we're running sudo apt update, and then I'm going to chain them together with 2 ampersand, and then I'm going to run sudo apt grade and -y. So we update the repositories, and then we download and install everything. We got to give it our password again. And now we're going to run a sudo apt install QEMU guest agent. Now, we already went ahead and enabled this as part of our setup when we installed Proxmox, but what this is necessarily going to do here is this is going to let our Proxmox server kind of have better information about CPU usage and RAM usage, as well as have networking information and other things inside of our VM. But in order to start this process, because it wasn't installed when we initially installed. Now, I go ahead when I build a Cloud Init image, I'll go ahead and automatically put this in, which is one of the advantages of Cloud Init, but there's more command line stuff involved in building out that image and stuff, so it makes it a lot harder for tutorials and for beginners that want to stick to the graphical interface. If you are one of those people that rather stick to the graphical user interface, it's great, it's all fine and dandy, but let me really push you to work at the command line. And I know it can be difficult, but you can figure out workflows over time that work for you. So one of the things that I do, because I really like copying and pasting things, is I'll set up an SSH session. Even though I have my console here that I can communicate with that server, I I have to type everything in a VM console. So if I SSH into it, I can bring back copying and pasting, and it's the same command line stuff. So, but if there's just so much more power involved in using the command line for the system. It's what your system's built on top of, especially for Linux, and it gives you so much more control and stuff. And even a lot of your utilities and a lot of your scripts and everything that you're going to run that are going to make your life easier, they're going to be used from the command. And if you have to depend on the graphical user interface to execute that stuff and do that stuff, you're going to be limited ultimately in your development. So just start using. I am going to try to make my tutorials so that you guys can go ahead and follow them. Our VM shut down. We can hide this screen here on my screen recorder. You can see what my desktop here looks like, and I can actually push this up to the top, and I can bring Proxmox window back up, and I'll just enlarge it here so you guys hopefully can see it a little bit better. It's not really going to change much of the font. It'll fill up a little bit more of desktop, I guess. But anyways, here's kind of the server layout and everything, and you can notice right here where my mouse is that guest agent not running here while the server is turned off, but that's what we just installed. So we can go ahead and hit start now, and the server is going to go ahead and boot up. Now, if I hadn't have had that window up, I would have had to have clicked console, but the server is going ahead and starting up right now. And see, now that the server is like up and running, we can actually see the server's IP address right here, which helps somewhat in even setting up your SSHs. So you don't have to log in, especially if you're on DHCP or something, log in and get your IP address and stuff. It's right there. It also helps update some of this information. It just makes things kind of work a little bit smoother. So now that we got our VM all installed and up and running, and you can see it here in the background, we're going to go ahead and use SSH. And again, that's so I can copy and paste. So we have a tutorial that we're following. We'll have a tutorial that's actually up on our blog when we're done. From doing my multiple test sessions and stuff, have found some problems with some of the other tutorials, and I want to go ahead and write my own for that reason, so that those few little nuances that are here in March of 2023 about doing the install are notated, and hopefully that helps somebody going ahead now in a year, whether those changes that have made the other write-ups obsolete or have happened again. Well, that's that, and go ahead and let me know about that even in the comments section of any of our videos. I routinely pull videos down that are no longer relevant and try to recreate them and put new ones up, or at least in the comments or in the write-ups, make notes about things that have changed or change commands or something to try to help us. So anyways, if we press the up arrow, we can get to our previous commands, and I did go ahead and try a test SSH into this particular server, as my Mac uses something like a known SSH sum to check servers, and where I fire up VMs so regularly, sometimes I can have to work through a process to clear that log or clear out a particular server, especially with the way my DHCP setup works. If these servers are running, they'll hold an IP forever, but if I'm triggering new servers quite frequently, the server will get assigned the same IP. So anyways, we can SSH in. And I did go ahead, if you're noticing, the text is a lot. From some of my comments that I've received lately, you guys complained about not being able to necessarily read what I was doing on screen as well. So I set up a profile, a terminal profile, and I used the default terminal that came installed with the Mac, and I do this just because I like things simple like that. I like just to work with what I have, and I know if I'm working with what I have, I always have it on every system. So anyways, I set up a profile though for my videos, which has a font of like 24 or 36 or something. So the font's quite a bit larger for you guys to look at. Now, I'm hoping that this necessarily doesn't affect us. I know in Docker, we have to like extend out the profile and stuff to see things accurately. And I'm hoping that doesn't affect us as much here, but we'll work with it as we need to, I guess, and see how it goes from there. So anyways, I just established an SSH connection. And again, you can see kind of here my computers, and I have a separate like VLAN that I was talking a little bit more about. So I'm actually in a whole different IP range here. Still private, still in the 192.168, but 3 instead of 6. So, and that's kind of because of that VLAN is why that's happened. But I'm able to talk to it still through the rules that are set up, the routing configuration and the firewall setting inside of my router firewall from. Anyways, we can go ahead and start the install now. The really awesome thing about K3s versus true Kubernetes is that we get an install script. So we're going to go ahead and actually do the install with only a few simple commands. We're going to start command with sudo, and then we're going to paste this install script. And it's carl sfl https get k3s.io pipe delimiter sh. I mean, simple command here. And we can go ahead, if I don't take the dash out, by hitting delete and hit enter here and enter a password. And our install process here starts from the script. Now, one of the benefits of K3s is it's super lightweight for resources, and it's been ported to ARM. So we could run this on even a Raspberry Pi, which might have been my better scenario, but we'll see here as we go along. So the next thing we need to do is actually see if K3s is up and running. And we can do that with the systemctl status k3s.service command. And you can see right here, activity active, and see that it is up and running. Now, to get out of this screen, we're going to press Control-C, and it's going to close it out. So we can verify the cluster node information, and this is kind of important to do. Less important so with K3s than K8s or true Kubernetes, but it will tell us a lot about what's going on here. And so now we actually have K3s up and running. And the last thing we need to do is kind of copy out the contents of a folder so that we have it for when we go and start setting up like our terminal. So this being more of like an industrial type software where it's meant for a large cluster and stuff, it's meant to have a single terminal or only a few terminals that communicate with it, not just like every system on the network. So in order to set that up, we're going to need information out of this file. So we're going to run sudo cat, and then we're going to run this etc brancher YAML file, and we're going to get this giant ugly out. Now, I am just going to start here right underneath the command, and I'm going to drag all the way down to the next command line, and then I'm going to right click and I'm going to go copy. Now, I used Atom, so I'll open Atom, and it's going to be kind of messy looking here at first because I'm using the free version, but we'll close out these windows and we're going to create a new file, and we'll just paste it in here, kind of see where it's at right now, and we can go ahead and just save this to our desktop. I'll just call it K3s notes, and I'll put a txt at the end of it here so that it is a text file. We'll go ahead and save that, and now we'll have it for a later date if we need. Let's put it up here on this desktop so you can see it, and we'll go ahead and we'll put Atom over here so we easily click to it. So the next thing we're going to need to do is actually start setting up our terminal, our system that's going to interface with this. Okay, so we're going to try actually running another command. So I did a little bit of searching and ended up at the Kubernetes website, the K8s website, and it looks like there's a possibility that we can use Snap to install this. If not, we're going to have to build it from binaries, which we can do here, but let's see for just convenience and stuff if we can use Snap to install kubectl. So the Kubernetes website is saying the command is snap install kubectl -- classic. Now, Ubuntu is a flavor of Ubuntu, so I'm anticipating it does have Snap in it. If you're not fully familiar with Snap, Snap is kind of like an app store type thing that's run by Nautilus, which is the makers of Ubuntu. Let's try running that with sudo. All right, so this is saying that kubectl is version 1.2 1.263. I know that there are some things with kubectl versions and stuff, so I'm going to hop back over to some of the other documentation I'm reading, which does have a way to check kubectl versions on our K3s server. So you can see that I've changed to the SS8 session for our K3s server, and I'm gonna enter the command. Now it looks like the output is a YAML file, but we're gonna run it. So it's kubectl output or kubectl version output equals YAML, and I'm gonna run that. And it looks like we're getting a permission deny, so let's try sudo in front of it. Okay, so getting quite a bit of information, but looks like get version 1.257, 1.263. Quite entirely sure if that indeed is Git version or the kubectl version. Client version, server version. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. Not feeling like this is very clean. Let's try. Yeah, so it looks like that might be the only way to get version output. I guess we could try this and just delete the output and see what happens. Definitely not as clean. It's the same information as. So I'm thinking that the server is 1.5 and we just downloaded 1.6. I'm going to go ahead and continue with the process and kind of see what happens here. Not entirely sure, so we're going to learn together. All right, so we're back here at the Ubuntu server, what I'll call the console server, I guess. And it looks like we're going to make a directory called cube, and then we're going to reach out, get a config file, and then we're going to make our users the owners of the config file, and we're going to set a chown 600 on this, which I'm not super familiar with. So what I'm going to do is go up here, and I'm going to delete this out, and I can run a command called ls-l, and that's going to tell us that, and I kind of know from how to read this structure that it's the chmod 600 made it a read-write for the owner only. So it's a read-write for the VE. So no group, no guests, nothing, just my user account. For your knowledge, 777 is read-write execute for everything, and I'm sure some of you have seen that in other tutorials that you've followed along on. Now, so from reading through this, it looks like we're going to now copy the contents of that folder that we displayed, that YAML file that we displayed earlier on our server and that we copied to Atom, and we're going to copy those actual contents over to this server, and we're going to put it in that config file that we built. And I guess we're going to call it config.yaml. I'm not entirely sure. See if I can read some more documentation here. All right, so this part's not entirely clear. When I do my write-up, I'll try to make it a little bit clearer what we're going to do here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try this once with you on camera, and then I'll probably end up like editing what I need to do, but I'll stop the camera, and I don't even know if you'll see this part at that point, but we'll see. So yeah. All right, so that config file is not a directory. It's an actual file. So that's cool to know. Let's run sudo and the path to that config file. We need that. All right, and it says that we're going to copy that entire YAML file that we had from our server over here, and then we're going to replace the localhost IP address here with the IP address of our server. That's 192.168.66. Proxmox. All right, and now we're going to close that and save it. And the next directions are to run the command, and we can check out the input. So we're going to run that kubectl version command that we had. And we're getting an input. I'm not entirely sure yet. They're saying it's from our server, but and it does look very, very similar to our server, but I'm personally not seeing a lot of information. I thought this was, yeah. So if we scroll up to the YAML file here, so versions are definitely different. I think this is kubectl on our system, but the next command is asking for cluster info. So let's run that, and okay, so it's running, and it's definitely spitting out some cluster information here. At least it knows the IP address, and then this command is supposed to get node information. So, and we can see that the server, which was indeed titled K3s master, status is running control plane master. So it looks like at this point we now have a working console and a working K3s server. So be back in a minute. Let me probably practice. I don't think I'll do it live, but maybe I will. We'll be back in a minute with, or a few seconds your time, with a project to go ahead and actually test this out and see how it works and see if we can get something up and running. All right. Alrighty. So I went ahead and I followed through the directions for setting up a test server here, or a test job here for this K3s cluster, which actually isn't really a cluster. As you noticed, we didn't do any joining. We just have this running on a single system right now as we start to learn about it. I'm going to need some more hardware, some more equipment and stuff to learn about that, and I'm not sure how that's going to happen here at the moment. I got 2 Raspberry Pis and a laptop with a burnt out fan with me. So that's that. You've heard me talk a little bit about that earlier in this video. But let's take a look. And I've stressed this before, but I'm still very much learning about K3s here at the moment. So I don't even fully understand this file. It was copied and pasted from the directions. And probably at the end of my tutorial, I will give, or not probably, I will give these directions the credit they deserve. They weren't 100%. They were closer than everything else that I looked at, but they do deserve some credit, and that's that. So here's the YAML file that we're going to run here in a minute. And Kubernetes, or K3s, both work similarly to Docker Compose, where we're going to build a YAML file that basically tells it how to set up its namespaces and its names and what app to use and where to get its app from and so on and so forth. And that's what we're building here. Now, I can kind of know that like replicas here equals 3. We're going to deploy 3 containers, or 3 separate pods, I believe they're called. And I'm not super clear on the full terminology here. This is definitely, me getting set up to learn about this. But we're going to figure it out, and we're going to continue to work through it. So anyways, and we're running an app called Who Am I? And I believe that is a image that we're pulling down off the internet from somewhere. Maybe it's a test image that came with it. I'm not entirely sure. I'm definitely going to have to research how to make my own images and stuff. At some point here, we're going to pass the connection on port 80, so it's going to be a web server to our IP address of our server, or our node rather, and that's basically what a lot of this goes. And I'm going to have to teach you more about this later. I don't know myself, but I figured it was good to take a look here before we just ran it. And so now we're going to close this out, and we can run a couple of different commands here to start to get some information about it. But the first one we have to do is actually tell kubectl, and if you notice, we're on our Ubuntu system, our console system. We're not working on our server, but we can tell kubectl to apply or run this YAML file that is going to deploy this. So that's the first thing we want to do. And now we're going to be able to run a few commands, starting with get namespace, which is going to start to tell us things. So you can see that we've got the K3s test pods up, and we have a few other things going on here. And I'm not entirely, we actually probably should have run this before we started our project to see what was there prior, but judging from the times, default kube systems, kube public, and kube node lease have been running since we actually created the K3s server, and K3s test is all that we added here. Now we're going to be able to get some pod data by running the command kubectl get pods namespace
should be
K3s test
-o
wide, and this is going to give us more information here. And it would be nice if I could expand this window out more, but the font blown up,
so with that,
we might be okay.
have a good night.
We might be able to get it. So you can see that we have 3 separate pods, or 3 separate instances of the pod running, or the image running, and we've assigned them a separate IP, and this is a separate like DHCP process that happens on the bridge inside of the K3s server. It's not my DHCP. It's not like we're in some different VLAN or something on my network. No, this is happening actually inside the server, inside the cluster itself. And we can see that they're here, and kind of get some more information about it. That's the one we just ran. So now to actually go ahead, we can destroy this. We can run this command. But I don't want to just jump off and start destroying this. I actually want to hop over here. This is the Ubuntu, and sorry I can't make it bigger. That's what it's set to the moment. And we're going to go to internet and open a web browser here. And so you can notice that we went to the IP address, and if you remember from this SSH session here, and you can kind of see up here, it's definitely a lot smaller than my main text, that this is the IP address of my server, and then we go to /test, so this is kind of the pass, the proxy pass, if you've done anything with reverse proxies or anything, but we're passing this off to this server, and we should, we can see that we're on 12, be able to refresh this, and we can watch these servers change, because that's the load balancer passing these messages off to the different pods. So as we go, we're doing a round robin, so every command comes in, for every request that comes in, we go to a different web server. Now, I know about that from kind of a little bit of knowledge about load balancing, I guess. Not anything from tutorials or information here that I'm seeing. We're definitely going to have to learn more, and I'm definitely going to have to learn more, and then hopefully teach you guys more, as long as there's interest and everybody seems excited about this. This is what I'm learning about, so I really hope there is. But I'm going to have to teach you guys more about that as I learn it, and learn how to set that up in that YAML file. I'm kind of excited to learn more about this. I think the system that I demonstrated today is a hair janky, so you're probably definitely going to see maybe another setup video. I'm not sure how this is going to work yet. I gotta kind of sit down and evaluate things, and it may also be based on just how well this video does. So please like, share, subscribe, comment, especially comment. Your guys' support are going to drive a lot of the decisions that are made coming out of this video, because I could snowball in budget quite quickly, and we don't make a lot of money on ad revenue. This is kind of what it is, and that's fine. That's what we do. But depending on hardware I use, Raspberry Pis are nearly impossible to find. They're going for over $200 a pop. I could pick up a laptop. I do have a laptop down here with a blown up cooling fan, but I stole the hard drive out of that for the new Dell server, because I didn't want to destroy the operating system that was on the Dell server's hard drive originally, in case I needed information from it. It was my wife I've sold work computers. So yeah, I don't know where we're going there. I definitely got to look into things. I'm not entirely sure. Like I said, we're kind of a little janky at the moment, so I got to figure this out here. Yeah, enough rambling. I think we got a working K3s server up and going, and I think I've taught you guys enough that you can go ahead and deploy one on your own. So please like, share, comment, let me know. Definitely discuss your feelings here on this. I do plan on doing a full-blown Kubernetes, I guess you'd call it the hard way video. I know that that's been taken and used by somebody else already because I watched a bunch of his videos, but we don't have the resources here at this time. I don't have them. I'm going to have to either purchase them or wait until we get to the Freedom House, which should be coming up fairly soon. The wife and I are going back and forth on dates and discussing that, but I'd say that'd be happening in the next 2 or 3 months. So with that, have a good night. Which should be coming up fairly soon. The wife and I are going back and forth on dates and discussing that, but I'd say that'd be happening in the next 2 or 3 months. So with that, have a good night.